Hey, it's me again. I'm getting ready for my book, The Secret Lives of the First Lady. Let's go. Honeymoon havoc. After arriving in Deer Park, Maryland with his stunning new bride, Grover soon learned the price he'd have to pay for taking such an interesting and attractive woman as his wife. Reporters swamped the area as scores and proceeded to do whatever they thought necessary to get a peek at the celebrated newlyweds. Like peeping Tom, they camped as close to the honeymooners' cottage as possible, scanning the structure with spyglasses in the hopes of scoring a prudent view. Waitstaff were stopped and interviewed on their way to the couple so that readers could discover what Frank and Grover were eating and drinking. The situation developed into a media circus that the president seemed powerless to stop. Not that he didn't try. Local hotels and taverns were persuaded to turn away reporters looking for a room, and security guards were charged with forcing reporters to move on, which they did, to other places that offered just as good a view. Though Frank, young, naive, and new to the limelight, endured it with a sense of humor, her husband was nearly as forgiving. He ended up calling the whole fiasco a colossal impertinence. The price of celebrity. Though predecessors like Dolly Madison and Julia Tyler enjoyed a popular status with the American people, the nationwide explosion of interest in Frank Cleveland was something new. She was the first presidential media star, a fact that has some odd and even dangerous manifestations. For one thing, the papers insisted referring to the First Lady as Frankie, a nickname she always hated. Though called Frank by her family from an early age, she always preferred Frances. And despite the efforts of her and her cynical husband, innumerable advertisers got away with using her name and image to sell their products. One enterprising merchant even had the First Lady's initials stitched onto his luggage and sold them on the street. But nothing better illustrates the preposterous situation in which she found herself than the time she attended an event in St. Louis. Upon seeing the First Lady's parasol, the crowd grew frenzied and rushed the podium. As eager fans scaled the wall to get a look at her, the curiosity grew to a fever pitch until a barricade was stormed and eventually smashed to pieces. Though Frank escaped physical harm, the debacle galvanized her and Grover's fear of the public's mania. And more importantly, the newspapers good for whipping it up. Burying the bustle. During Frances's first term as First Lady, two Washington reporters found themselves hard up for a story during the slow summer season, so they invented one. According to the fixtures they printed, the First Lady, whose fashion choices always sold copies, decided to stop wearing the bustle, a frame worn at the time to expand the backside of a woman's skirt. In fact, Frances decided to do no such thing, but once the story was printed, virtually everyone in the country stopped wearing bustles. And the First Lady, confronted with a fait accompli, whatever that means, decided to follow suit, spell the demise of a clothing trend that had dominated women's fashion for years. Baby Ruth. The media coverage that dominated the presidencies of Grover Cleveland eventually took a toll on his family life. Between Grover's two terms, Frank gave birth to a little girl, their first child, named Ruth. Like everything else that was part of the Cleveland's, little Ruth became a sensation, and Candy Bar was named after her, of course, but that was just the tip of the iceberg. After winning the presidency for a second time in 1892, Grover and Frances found that their child's safety was being threatened by the celebrities at Johnson family. When Frank saw little Ruth being handled by a crowd of tourists come to visit the White House, red flags started going up all over the place. On another occasion, a visitor to the mansion actually tried to clip a bit of hair from Ruth. It was more than Frank was willing to bear. The White House grounds were closed to the public, leading to speculation that the first family was hiding some mental or physical defect in baby Ruth. Nothing could be further from the truth, of course, but that didn't stop the newspapers from spreading rumors. Blind faith. Late in life, Frank Cleveland began to suffer from blindness, but her mind and courage were such that merely accepting her fate passively was out of the question. She quickly learned Braille, and not just for her own convenience. Frances spent a great deal of time transcribing literature to Braille for others with the affliction, a project she continued to do even after surgery successfully removed her cataracts. Out of sight, out of mind. The dependency of Harry Truman and H. Frank paid a visit, along with other Washington notables, to the White House. There she met General Dwight Eisenhower, who had recently become one of the most famous men in history by defeating Hitler's Germany in the Second World War. But if his name had long since become a household word, Frank's had not. Especially since she remarried after the death of her presidential husband, Grover Cleveland. Now going by the name Frances Preston, she approached the German and was greeted with what can only be called a letdown. "And where did you live in Washington, ma'am?" asked a clueless voicer. Her response embarrassed him mightily. "In the White House." "Oh. Yeah. Oh." Chapter 19. Caroline Harrison. October 1st, 1832 through October 25th, 1892. Married October 20th, 1853. Presidential husband, Benjamin Harrison. Children, Russell Lord and Mary Scott. Firstly, 1889 through 1892. Astrological sign, Libra. Religion, Presbyterian. Soundbite. Very few people understand to what straits the president's family has been put at times for lack of accommodation. Carrie Harrison helped bring electric lights to the White House, but she feared electrocution so much that she refused to touch the switches. Oh my effing Lord. No effing way, man. Okay. Caroline Lavinia Scott Harrison served as First Lady after and before one of the most popular women ever to occupy the White House. The country simply didn't take to her like it did to Frank Cleveland. Mrs. Harrison was plump, grandmotherly, and exceedingly domestic, all of which played a role in forging her relatively bland public image. But underneath the white-haired, matronly exterior dwelled a dynamic side of Mrs. Harrison for which she was never properly credited. A savvy activist who finally put the stamp of the White House on women's issues. Carrie was born into a large Presbyterian family in Oxford, Illinois. One of 5 children of Mary Potts Neal Scott and Dr. John Witherspoon Scott. Her father, a minister and professor, was a devout believer in the power of education, and Carrie ended up studying at a school he founded, Oxford Female Institute. While there, she met a fellow Presbyterian named Benjamin Harrison, who was attending what would become known as Miami University in Ohio. He was a stern, sober-minded student who, true to his faith, refused to dance, none of which dissuaded Carrie from falling for him. At parties, Ben usually watched from the silence while his gal broke the Presbyterian band on hitting the dance floor. Carrie was more than just an eager, well-read student. She had run into a vivacious and sincere young woman with a sly sense of humor and a gift for disarming people with it. The two kept their engagement a secret, not least on account of the alarm it would have caused to Carrie's relations and proper father, and managed to keep up a lively courtship that spanned their 2 campuses. After being married by Dr. Scott in 1853, the Harrisons embarked upon their new life together. In poverty, after teaching during her senior year in college, Carrie became a full-time homemaker while Ben struggled to make a law practice. After being admitted to the bar in 1854, the same year that Carrie gave birth to their first child, Russell, the family moved to Indianapolis, Indiana, and things began to get easier for them. Through the rest of the decade, Ben's practice picked up and he became active in the Republican Party. Carrie, meanwhile, began to develop the willingness to join things that would characterize her later years. She taught Sunday school at the local church, sang in the choir, raised money for charities, and still found time to raise her 2 children and indulge in her artistic side by painting watercolors. The Civil War would offer more clubs to become a part of. While Ben raised a regiment of Indiana soldiers and went off to lead them for the Union, his wife did her part by nursing the wounded, joining the Ladies' Patriotic Association to raise money for the Northern cause, working for the Ladies' Sanctuary Committee, another war-related society, and helping lead the Indianapolis Orphans Asylum, on whose board she was serving till the end of her life. She had become an inspiration to women of her time, a devoted wife and mother whose happy attachment to hearth and home never got in the way of her tireless efforts to make a difference in the wider world around her. Peace has brought more happiness and prosperity, while her husband earned piles of cash at his offer, enough to get them a palatial new house. Carrie continued to set an example in Indianapolis as I joined classes to study art and literature, throwing her energies into the local missionary society and even helping to create the Impromptu Club, whose members gathered to discuss books. It was perfect training to become a real political wife, which Carrie did in 1880 when Ben got elected to the United States Senate. His victory, however, came with a price. During his 1880 campaign, Carrie slipped on some ice and suffered a painful fall. From then on, her health would always be in question. After the Harris moved to Washington, capital socializing would be hampered for Mrs. Harris during long bouts of illness. But her husband's career was on a roll, and in 1888, the Republicans nominated him for the presidency, and Carrie wasn't the type to let her health get in the way of progress. In a political campaign that pitted her against the Venus of American politics, Frances Cleveland, Carrie was sold to the people as a proper, well-educated lady who became a teacher and who embodied all of the foremost qualities of a Christian. It didn't work, of course, but her husband was elected anyway by a nation eager for a changing of the guard. But the fight was a tough one, and Carrie got fed up with all the press coverage and that accompanied it. If there's any privacy to be found in the White House, she proclaimed Ben's victory. I propose to find it and preserve it. Yeah, right. In fact, privacy wasn't the only thing in short supply at the White House. Space was neither. With the new first couple came their very copious family, a clan that ran the gamut from baby McKee, Carrie's grandson, to the First Lady's 90-year-old father. They inundated the mansion's paltry, dilapidated living space like an invading horde, and Carrie decided to do something about it. Lobbied Congress for a drastic expansion, but members of Congress didn't have to live in the White House, and the old building looked just dandy from Capitol Hill, so they gave the administration enough money for a modest refurbishment. Carrie did all the redecorating that she could, when she wasn't devoted time to her list of charities, which included the Garfield Hospital and the Washington City Orphan Asylum. Indeed, Carrie continued to throw her energies into good works and causes, unlike the several equally well-educated first ladies who came before her. She had no problem whatsoever attaching her esteemed name to the advancement of women. She helped raise money for the Women's Medical Fund of Johns Hopkins University, an organization that provided money to the school in the strict condition that it offered full equality to female students. She got her husband to hire Alice Sanger, the first woman stenographer ever to draw a paycheck in the White House. She became the first President General of the New Daughters of the American Revolution, a clothes she intended to use as a vanguard in the struggle for women's suffrage and rights. She did it all while advising her husband, singing to her brooded children and grandchildren, becoming a celebrated presidential hostess. One whose gifts for seeing every detail led the press to label her a domestic diva while virtually ignoring her other roles. Carrie offered another asset to the administration, too, and an important one. She compensated her husband's legendary frostiness. Labeled the White House iceberg, Benjamin Harrison had a frigid demeanor that tended to freeze out friends and foes alike, and Carrie's warm, invigorating manner and sense of humor were appreciated very much indeed during the Harrison years. Unfortunately, even she had a hard time bearing up under the severe sickness that overcame her in 1892. Whether tuberculosis, cancer, or something else, historians continue to speculate. Carrie's long history of battles began to exact its final toll during her husband's bid for re-election. It was a morbid campaigning season. Her death in October that year inspired respectful silence from both her husband's and Grover Cleveland's camp, smothering nearly all of the stomping spirits that usually accompany presidential contests. When Ben lost, media star Frank Cleveland was restored to the first ladyship, exiling Carrie Harrison to a humble place in history. She deserved better. Way better. Please rate, comment, and subscribe down below. And if you're on YouTube, please ring that bell notification so you can know when I upload. And if you're on TikTok, please like and follow my videos. And please pay for something on either my eBay and or Mercari. Okay? Bye!